Hi, and welcome back to another edition of Inside Great Lakes Sailing. My name is Greg Norman, your host. There are times when fantasy and reality collide, and today is one of those days. We have the great honor of talking to Harry Melges III, who is running the Melges Boat Company in Wisconsin, and we had a chance to talk to Harry about a variety of subjects, including boat design. Harry was at Crescent Sail Yacht Club this past weekend for the Melges 24 National Championships, which his group, including his son Harry IV, took fourth place. And it was an honor to be able to talk to somebody at the level that Harry is. Melges builds about 250 boats annually, sport racing boats annually, and we got a chance to sit down and talk with him. It was fun, it was enjoyable, and I think you'll certainly enjoy the conversation. So stay tuned, and off we go. Welcome back to another edition of Inside Great Lakes Sailing. My name is Greg Norman, your host. We are lucky enough to have with us one of America's premier sailors, part of a premier sailing family, and certainly one of the best boat designers in the United States. And that's Harry Melges III. We had a lucky opportunity to talk to Harry's son last week about running a race here at the Nationals at Crescent. So first of all, I appreciate you coming aboard and taking some time and talking. I guess my first easiest question is talk a little bit about the national championships you had here in Detroit.
Yeah, I mean, we had a great time in Detroit. Crescent Sail Club did an awesome job hosting the regatta. Race committee did a great job in some trying wind conditions on Friday and Sunday. It was pretty light and random breeze, so they did a good job getting off the races. And Saturday was epic sailing with, nice 8 to 16 or so in nice waves. So we got some good surfs downwind and great parties. It was just a great atmosphere and a really fun time, really fun weekend. It's always fun to sail with my son and all his young friends too. So that was a good experience.
Makes for a fun weekend. Lake Geneva was well represented. You guys were fourth, I think, overall, and the champion was also from Lake Geneva, from your part of the world. He's also, I think, an 8-time. Mr. Porter is an 8-time, I think, national champion.
Yeah, Brian Porter on Full Throttle. He's from Lake Geneva here. And yeah, I think that's right. He's won eight times. So
it must have some local races that are legendary.
Well, yeah, we have a good fleet here at Lake Geneva, and we do a lot of other sailing in other boats as well. So Brian sails E-Scows and Melges 24s are his two primary boats, I would say.
Yeah.
Spends a lot of time in both boats, on and off the lake. So very good sailor.
Well, what do we want to talk to you about? You're a very accomplished sailor in your own right. You're a 5-time on the 24s. You're a 5-time national champion, a 2-time North American champion, and I believe a 3 or 4-time world champion, if not mistaken.
1-time world winner, bunch of times second, but mostly crewing for people. So
the question I want to ask is up front is that sailing is an avocation that's become a vocation. And there's always that joke that if you end up being involved in your hobby, you spend less time doing your hobby and more time working your hobby. So my question to you, just from a CEO standpoint, is you get a chance at this point to go around the country and sail in different places, but do you get to sail as much as you would like running the company that you run?
Probably not. It's hard to do both. It's hard to do a lot of sailing and also stay on top of the day-to-day happenings in our business with all the boats that we're building, and we do a lot of sail design and sales work as well. So those two things keep us very busy. In Zenda, we try to get out and attend as many regattas as we can. Not always sailing, but at least being on hand to help customers with parts and tuning questions or any boat issues they might have.
The other question I was going to ask is that your dad was a legendary sailor. Your relationship with your son very similar to your relationship with your father. And how do you get, as a family, how do you get that good at sailing? I mean, obviously it's time in the boat and the skills, but you guys seem to be very successful at sailing. And what's it like having been the son of Buddy? Obviously, then is there a transference down the similarities to what you do with your own son?
I think so, for sure. I mean, I think the key is that we grow up sailing a lot of fast, fun boats, and you grow up sailing with adults and family. And I think we try to focus that around a lot of the boats that we build, is that they're family friendly boats, and that anybody can sail. Like, all the scout classes are really good about, in the E Scout, for instance, or the A Scout, actually most of the scout classes, you can put a crew on when it gets windy and take them off again when it gets light. So it really makes it easy to put young kids on the boat when it gets windy, and they get to sail with adults, and they not only learn a lot, but they really get hooked on the sport at a young age, because they experience these awesome boats going really fast and experience it, with adults. And I think it makes a big difference. But when you grow up at a really great club like Lake Geneva with a lot of different boats and a lot of great sailors, you kind of get ingrained in that program, and it's pretty hard not to get good, I think, when you spend that much time around, such a good, positive environment.
Was Buddy at all a helicopter dad, or did he just let you go sail?
Yeah, he just kind of let us do our own thing. We did do a lot of sailing with Buddy when we were kids, and as a family, we sailed the E Scout quite a bit when we were younger, and that's what we've done with our kids. Our son started driving an E Scout when he was 12, and our whole family would be crewing. So
yeah,
it's just a fun way to grow up doing it and learning, and that's good family time too.
If you had one boat to sail in your fleet, what would it be?
I mean, the E Scout is the ultimate ride. I think it's hard to beat an E Scout, but Melges 24s are right there as well. The 24 takes you to a lot of great venues around the world. So programs. So, like A Scouts, you have 6 or 7 people on the boat. So it's more of a team effort, but at the same time, they're super fast and physical and just awesome boats to sail and race as well. So
where'd you go to college?
To Madison in Wisconsin.
So you're a Badger.
Yeah.
What did you study? Did you study engineering?
No, just business.
Okay. 92, Dad comes home from the World Cup, from the America's Cup, decide you're going to start building the 24s. That's when you kind of took over the company. Am I correct?
Yeah, my brother and I were kind of running things when Buddy went full time into the America's Cup program, probably with the Heart of America back in 86, 87. And then I spent some time with America Cubed out in San Diego, and we got to know John Reichel and Jim Pugh. And the Hunts, my brother was back here in Zenda, thinking at that time we were a J-boat dealer. And, we kind of grew up sailing high performance, fast boats. So we were keen to do something a little more high performance than what we were experiencing with the J24. That's kind of where the Melges 24 started. And we started talking to Reichel Pugh during the Cup in San Diego in 92. And that's kind of how it all started with the Melges 24 coming out in late 93.
What I wanted to talk to you about specifically is talk a little bit about boat design. And I guess you go through a year, and I'm sure you write notes to yourself about things that can be better. And how do you talk us through a typical development of either a new boat or how you might develop? Now, the 40 Melges that you have looks very much like a mini version of the new TP52s. I mean, there's boats look like sort of that are high performance sailboats. You guys are one of the best high performance sailboat companies left building, because there's not many. And I think when we talked earlier, you said about 250 boats a year. So kind of walk us through what you guys, from an R&D standpoint, so that if I didn't know anything about how boats are developed, maybe kind of walk us through it.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it starts with, what boat that you really want to build. I mean, a lot of our boats, like the Melges 24, kind of came along early on because we saw a need for a more high performance keel boat. And that's kind of developed into a great class. That boat, we kind of approach, we don't do the naval architecture work. We use Reichel Pugh Yacht Design, or more recently, Mark Mills worked with all of us with the IC-37 with the New York Yacht Club. But we kind of take our concept to the naval architect and they draw the lines. And, we start with a package that all of us have refined on the computer these days. And typically we build a prototype and then you go out and start testing. And, we test rig sizes, keel weights, you name it, you test it, different cockpit layouts. A lot of the stuff you'll mock up full size in the shops for fit and comfort, stuff like that, to make sure it's good before you actually build a boat. But it starts with an idea like everything, and then it kind of evolves from there. Some of the other classes have evolved. I think early on, we'd kind of build a boat that we thought was the cool boat that, we would want to sail. I think more recently, we've transitioned into building a boat that we think that the masses will want to sail. So I think that has kind of changed a little bit in how we approach things and look at things. Like the Melges 15, we really wanted all ages to be able to sail that boat, from, young kids all the way up to 80-year-old adults. So, and I think we've achieved that. We've really focused on making the boat comfortable and as stable as possible for a 15-footer, but yet still has performance and gets up and goes downwind.
What fuels the decision to go from a boat you think is cool to a boat that you think you can sell more of? Is that just a business decision, or is it a marketing?
It's a business decision. And I think at the end of the day, we want to try and help and keep more people sailing and enjoying the sport, but also help raise the level of sailing in the U.S. I think the more we can get our young people sailing fast, fun, high performance boats, the more that those kids will stick with it, and the better they're going to get at sailing and be much more competitive against the rest of the world.
Do you think it's speed at the young ages that attracts them to stay?
I think that's a big part of it. Controlled speed is pretty key. I mean, there's other aspects, and everybody's probably a little bit different, but most of the kids we see that get really hooked on the sport and get into it are kids that really love the speed and the adrenaline and, the competition and that side of it.
One of the conversations we've had a lot on the show is that kids don't get enough inside baseball. They don't get out in boats to go sail. It seems like every time we look around, there's got to be an instructor. There's got to be some kind of formal program. And I think if you watch a lot of yacht clubs, that's kind of the point. You don't get out as much as they might. I'm not sure why that is.
Yeah, I mean, our kids grew up sailing open bicks and just going out and ripping around, not really focused on racing until they started racing with us at a little later, older age, probably closer to 11-ish when they started racing boats at all. I think some of the opti sailors get pushed too young to go race. I think first you need to go out and learn how to sail and just go reach around and have fun and do it on a boat that rewards that they can tip over on and get it back up and just go sail away. And they don't get scared by doing it. After they tip over once or twice and get comfortable with that, pretty soon they're on 20 plus, just ripping around on their own and having a blast.
Let me go backwards. We have a number of boats in our harbor that were built in the 1920s, 1930s. And if you look at those boats, they look, if you were to fiberglass the sides, they look almost like the modern boats to some extent. So my point is, I know the CAD had a lot to do with naval architecture, but did the guys 100 years ago, 125 years ago have as much understanding of, not as much understanding, but they were really smart about boat design. Boat design hasn't changed all that much, has it, in the last 100 years?
I mean, it's probably been refined and boats have gotten lighter with construction advances for sure. And, I think foils have probably advanced quite a bit from what they used to be. But like scows, I think the A-scow hull shape, it's still one of the oldest one design classes racing in the world. And the scow hull shape is really advanced. I mean, you see a lot of boats in Europe now and really all over that have been influenced by the Scottish shapes. And I think that, I think a lot of those designers, were pretty smart back then. And they did a lot of trial and error, which they could do fairly easily with the wood boats. You could change shape on every boat you built, basically, especially, if you were in a production wood boat building era. Where with fiberglass, you're kind of stuck with your mold shape. It's better for one design, but it doesn't really advance the hull shape unless you start with a whole new, hull design on a new class.
When's the last time you introduced a new boat?
Well, the Melges 15 is our most recent, which we introduced a little over a year ago now.
Now, when you guys will sit down sometime during the year and decide that you're looking at performance, you're looking at various design. How does the idea of making it better, where does that come from? Is it from word of mouth or by your own personal touch by being on the boat? You sort of like in updating a car. Every year there's a little bit different. The Ford Escape in 217 doesn't look like the same Ford Escape that they built in 221.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's experience. It's getting feedback from as many sailors as possible, looking at other product that's out on the market, weeding out the good from the bad, and doing a lot of on-water testing to see what works and what's good. But also you have to factor in the cost, because you can make something awesome, but the cost is just too high for the masses and you just won't sell that many boats. So these days, cost is really critical, I think, to the success of a class and getting it off the ground.
Does material, all of the graphite, all of the fiberglass, that changes? So you guys are at the forefront of those changes, obviously. Does it change as often as we think it does? It seems like every year there's something new, and I'm not sure if that's the product promotion or if it's really a better way of looking at something. The old Tide that I used to use gets my clothes just as clean as the new Tide. But
yeah,
if you read the magazine,
the resins have advanced quite a bit and gotten better. And so have the gel coats. I wouldn't say that the carbon and the e-glass has really changed much in the last 20 years. It's almost the same material we were using back then. Maybe the highest modulus materials have improved, but I think the biggest advances have been in resin and gel coats.
I'm curious to know one thing. How many boats do you have to sell in a class to make it profitable? I know that depends on the cost of the boat, but
yeah, I mean, it depends on your margin on each boat. If it's a small one design boat, probably you're looking at 100 boats before you break even. So, your mold costs, but there's so much time that goes into development that it's hard to even put a price on. All the water testing time and, recutting and remodeling, sails and masts, and it's a huge, daunting project to do it right and to spend the time to dial things into the level that they need to be before you launch it to the public.
Before you actually build a mold, how long, what kind of time frame, what kind of lead up time frame does it take to get to the naval architects to go through the process?
We start with a bullet point list of features we want on the boat, how we want the boat to look. We talk about the shape a lot and what have you, and then from there we'll build a prototype, unless it's a big boat. The big boats are pretty dialed in these days, but if it's a smaller boat, it's pretty key to build a prototype and really refine the cockpit layout, not so much the hull shape, but just the ergonomics in the cockpit and the rig sizing and what have you. Getting the horsepower right on a smaller boat is pretty critical, I think, for the masses, so that it's not too overpowering for the general sailor and not too underpowered where it's no fun for the better sailors in the class. So got to find that sweet balance.
There's an old joke that there's always a price point. There's rich people can always afford expensive boats, but are the price points of boats, especially smaller ones, hurting a little bit in terms of maybe offering more boats to more folks? You still have to make a profit on what you build, but does that keep a percentage of them? Is that something you think about of how do you get to more? Because cost is a factor.
It is. It's a big factor, and we're always looking at ways to reduce the cost, but in the product. I think we've done a good job of that with the new 15, and that we've gone back away from carbon mass. We're using extruded aluminum foils. You can really get a lot of cost out, but we've increased durability, and performance-wise, it's negligible, the performance difference. So you can definitely get carried away with trying to make it the ultimate boat and just getting it way too expensive. And
when you do your marketing or when you do your research, do you spend much time talking with U.S. Sailing in terms of maybe what trends might be?
we don't. I mean, we kind of do that on our own and, kind of feel out where we think there's a gap in the market, that could possibly be filled with a good boat. I think COVID also changed the way people were buying boats. I mean, we sold a lot more single-handed and double-handed boats in the last year and a half than we have, on an average per year sales volume in a long, long time. So that completely changed what boats people were buying. And, we happened to be coming out and working on the 15 when that hit, and we're able to launch that at a good time, and sales just took off in the N15 class.
What keeps you awake at night about sailing and selling sailboats?
These days, it's how to get them all built because there's so much demand and labor is super tight. And, getting materials from around the world is really difficult with shipping issues. And a lot of companies have really been hurt with COVID and labor issues. So a lot of the companies we work with are, working at a much reduced rate. So it's really difficult for us to get what we need to ramp up production and deliver more boats more quickly. That's probably the hardest things.
You guys have recently coupled with Quantum sales. Am I correct?
That's correct. Yeah.
So in a design aspect, I'm a cruiser, and we have a lot of fun sailing, and it's been a great thing. And as I've moved to Crescent, you see these racers and guys with flashlights at night looking at the sail shape and the rest of it. And that's just
right.
We can talk all day about, ski racing wax, but I don't, how much is boat, how much is sales? And is there, again, I'll go back to overload. Is there such a thing as overload? Sometimes shouldn't it be the guy running the boat that makes the difference rather than all of the.
It for sure, it all adds up. I mean, all the boats are pretty darn one design, I would say. I think because the sails aren't one design in a lot of the classes, the sails make a big difference, a huge difference, actually. Tuning is obviously important, but yeah, you have to be able to put the whole package together and sail it well at the same time. So you can have the best sails made and not be able to tune the rig or not be able to sail the boat well, and you're still not going to do well. So it's pretty important to be able to put the whole package together. But that's also with the Melges 15, we have one design sail. So everybody has the same sails. So you're leveling the playing field as much as possible. And even the tuning on the boat is somewhat minimized with a fixed forestay length. So it comes down to trimming the sails and how you sail the boat. I think that, takes or puts more enjoyment into the class because there's just less money for people to have to spend to go fast, and they can just show up and go sail and know that everybody has the same equipment.
The TP52s have been very successful by having very limited tolerances to make those boats as close to identical as possible. Is that something that we should do with a lot of the classes?
Well, yeah, but the TP52 is more of a box rule, isn't it? Where things are more open in that class.
Yeah.
I think it's gotten tighter, but that's what keeps the development going in that class, I think. And obviously that's a big money game, but it's a little different setup than most of our one design classes. Well, I think in the one design classes, it's important to keep them one design, but also advancing with the times. If there's advancements that make the boats easier to sail, more cost effective to build and more enjoyable to sail, then it's important for the classes to keep an open mind and keep that development process moving forward.
The reason I'm asking the question is, does Quantum at the highest level know more about sailmaking on an equivalent sail that North might have? Or
Of course.
Yeah, I get the marketing aspect. Are you guys not all buying your material from basically the same place in China? And because if I listen to their marketing, if I listen to their marketing, I listen to Quantum's marketing, or I listen to, pick Head for that matter. You pick any number of sailmakers. If I get the same material, I would think that the sails are fairly similar in process.
Well, the design, the flying shape can change quite a bit, actually. And you have to put the flying shape together with how the structure is engineered in the material and in the sail. So it can have a pretty big effect on the ultimate speed of the sail. But, it starts with a good sail designer who knows what the sail shape should be for that particular boat and knows how to, match the sail to the mast. I mean, I know there's a lot of computer programs that help do that, but at the end of the day, you still have to do the seat of the pants sail making to fine tune the final sail to make it the best that it can be on any boat that I've been on.
As we're talking semantics, the thought hit my head that if we could eliminate or maybe even make the wording of sailing a little more elementary, there's a word for everything we do. And I think sometimes we lose folks to sailing because it seems complicated when it may not be as complicated. And I think that's something that maybe sailmakers and certainly boat makers you can't change that. It's nautical terms and naval terms that have come around for, a couple of 100 years. But I just think there's a name for everything, and pull this, pull that, left, right, port. I think that changes a little bit from that standpoint.
Yeah, for sure. It's not easy. If you grow up into it, it's great. But yeah, if you're coming in at an older age, it's tough. You got to learn all that new jargon.
You've got some small foils in your fleet that you guys have built. Am I correct?
Well, we don't. You're talking about the Skeet and the Nicky?
Yeah.
Yeah, we don't build those boats. We import those boats from Skeeta Foiling Craft down in Melbourne, Australia, from Jim and David French. And those are small scows, and that's what really caught our eye because, we've all tried foiling, and moths are the ultimate foiler for, single-handed foiler, but they're really difficult to sail and get to the level where you can sail the boat on the foils all the time. And, you do a lot of swimming, and then the crashes are extreme. And the Skeet and the Nicky platform is a really stable hull shape because that's the scow hull shape. You don't do so much swimming, the boat's much more stable in displacement mode. So it's much easier to learn on those stable platforms than it is on a higher performance moth or something similar to that is really challenging for the average person to go out and foil on and get that experience.
The trail seems to be leading towards foils if you follow the America's Cup rules in the process. And are we missing on something with foils? Should we have more of them? Should there be more foils in junior sailing and certainly at the lower levels? Or is it one of those that's just going to be a part of the sport rather than maybe be the dominant part of the sport? And I asked that question was when Gary Jobson made some comments about TP52s possibly being the next America's Cup boat if the New York Yacht Club would have won the America's Cup this year, to get rid of foils, to go back to that created quite a bit of conversation. And a lot of guys who had or were selling 52s hung on until obviously they didn't win, but it did create quite a conversation this past winter. So my question is, are we missing out on foils, and should we be teaching our kids more about them?
Well, for sure. I think the kids should be learning about foils and learning to foil. And that's what's so great about the Nicky, which is a kid's foiler, and the Skeeta. They both make it really easy for the kids to jump on and learn how to sail. And Sail GP has an initiative with the Skeeta and the Nicky where they're going to various yacht clubs around the country to do foiling camps. This weekend they have one in Chicago. So, they're really pushing it at the grassroots level. And I think it's another great way to get kids hooked on the sport. They may not end up racing foiling boats, but it keeps them in the sport and gets them to sail other boats at the same time. I mean, foiling, I think at a very high level, is definitely here to stay with a lot of the, high-end boats. But I think for the masses, you're not going to see racing, foiling boats anytime soon. I think, it's a different kind of sailing. It's obviously super fast, not as much maneuvering, stuff like that. It's not to say that that's not a lot of fun and great, but I think traditional tactics are pretty hard to beat in a traditional displacement mode upwind program. No matter what boat you're in, it's pretty enjoyable sailing, and it's never going to go away.
There's been some information in Sailing World and a few other magazines that, by the end of this century, by the end of this decade, we might be approaching, with foils 50 knot speed with the new, that's sort of the way it's going. Which to me is great for racing, because the faster you go, the more exciting. And I mean, certainly that is true in the America's Cup. But I have one of those old racer cruisers, that you're trying to serve two masters. And a company like yours builds race boats. They don't build cruisers. You build open cockpit, fast, Ferraris. Does that hurt the sport? And I say that because I'd love to race my boat, but it's a floating front room. And as long as I have a 40-inch television that I can watch, I'm not racing with any efficiency, anything, anything fast. And does that mixed message between the sport, should we be separating it more and making it literally two different sports? Because it really is.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it needs to be two different sports. I think that's a great thing about sailing, is that there's so many different type of boats that you can sail. There's so much variety and so many options for people around the world that's what's so cool about the sport. I think there's a place for all of the different boats personally, from super fast foiling boats to racer cruisers or even just cruising. I think, there is a place for all those different boats in our sport.
You cruise at all?
I think it expose more people to all of them, so more
Right.
people want to do it, get comfortable doing it.
Do you cruise at all?
I don't.
The reason I asked the question goes back to the previous question. There really are two worlds. There's those who race and there are those who cruise, and sometimes they don't overlap. They may on beer-handed Monday night league or something, but for the most part, the fast guys are done, and we're still coming in from the back of the pack, and it's still enjoyable. That doesn't change the premise, but.
No, I'm racing from the time I leave the dock to the time I get back to the dock. But at some point, I'll probably enjoy cruising.
Is there anything on the horizon that of technologically that would help all sailboats? A cruiser like me, what should I be looking for, coming up? Is there something in sailing that's maybe becoming, especially some guys that are trying to maybe refit older boats?
I mean, nothing earth-shattering. I'm sure we'll have autonomous sailing boats at some point. We have cars coming online pretty quicker, and I know that there's a pretty good group of older gentlemen that have asked us to work on that. But so someday you'll have that going on probably, which maybe will allow more people into the sport because it'll be easier for them to do and not be intimidated by, at least in a keel boat or a catamaran or something that's fairly stable.
What's next? Go ahead.
Well, I'm sure that's going to come online, sooner than later as we get that way with everything else in our lives.
If I were to ask what's, back in the research room in the back in the dark closet, what's on the horizon that you guys are looking at this point?
I mean, we always have something in the back of our minds, but definitely top secret until we put it out there.
Is it most of the time speed based, because you're obviously racing boats? Is it usually directed towards speed?
It's not always speed based. I think right now it's what puts more butts in boats, as somebody said at one point. But I think, these days it's more about that, in my opinion, keeping sailing and growing, or, going the right direction in terms of how many people are doing it, enjoying it.
So for an old reporter who covered a lot of professional sports, I don't think I've come across an event or competition or an activity like sailing that does a poorer job at promoting itself. And I say that because I'm a college lacrosse coach with a YouTube program who can get to you and Dennis Conner and some serious guys.
Yeah.
Why hasn't sailing done a better job of promoting itself? And I say that because I can, the joke is that the guys that are making it on YouTube are guys with a sailboat, a pretty girl, and a palm tree. That's fine, except usually the guys on those boats, they just bought them 2 years ago. They never sailed before, and they're off on this great adventure. So I'm sure we watch because of the adventure. But an America's Cup gets such little publicity as compared to other national, international sport levels. Is that from a professional standpoint, is that a fair estimation?
I think so. I think people outside of sailing don't understand the sport, so it makes it difficult to watch, probably. And
how do you
why sailing doesn't promote itself better, I'm not really sure. There's an entity that has the resources to do it, other than the marine related businesses. But I think we tend to market to other sailors and not enough outside of sailing, probably.
So how do you put more fannies in boats if you don't expand the population?
Yeah, I think it starts at the grassroots level, exposing kids to more fun boats to sail so they get hooked on it and keep wanting to do it. I think right now there's the fallout rate and the boats we have now that kids are sailing is really high. We don't do a good job cultivating those kids to be lifelong sailors. It's too much about race. And a lot of those kids don't enjoy that at that young age.
Is part of it confusion? And let me answer the question by asking the question. When I talk to different junior sailing directors around the country, they literally have different opinions about the same subject. And it's not like there's a slight deviation between it. It is completely different. And I say it based on, if 75% of kids who start at any sport, this is a national number, at 8 years old, they start to be, by the time they're 14, 75% of the time they quit the sport.
Yeah.
But part of it is, if you don't make it more fun, again, inside baseball, how are they ever going to grow the sport, which in your case is important because they have to buy boats from you?
Yeah, well, I think the boats have to be fun to sail first and foremost. And then, the whole racing part of it has to change a little bit and be more fun for the kids at the same time. It starts there, but I think you look around the country at the successful junior programs. We have a really good successful junior program in the inland here with the X-Boat fleet. And the boats, it's two-person boat, which I think helps a lot. A lot of kids don't want to sail single-handed or alone. That helps bring them in at a young age as crews. And the young crews sail with a little older skipper, and their regattas are really social too. Really fun for the kids to attend, and that's been very popular. And that feeds into the adult scout classes at the same time. Keeping those kids in the sport longer.
As a boat designer, would you redesign the Optimist?
Yeah. You'd have to start with a clean slate there. But I mean, that class is so ingrained all over the world, it would be hard to ever displace the Optimist. But I do think that kids should be getting out of the Optimist at a younger age and moving to something more high performance, for sure.
I think you keep kids involved when there's more to learn and when it's more fun to learn. And I think sometimes we get static in, and I say this from an outside coach looking in at the sport with a jaundiced eye. I think you look at the sport and see the numbers aren't there as they could be. I think it's returned a little bit this year because I think a lot of kids had a chance to get out of COVID, and doing anything was an improvement.
Right.
And if you talk to junior sailing directors who are not buying boats at this point, I think those numbers work back to normal because they don't have the same consequence of what COVID has provided. But
yeah, I mean, I think of classes that we see a lot of success in are where adults can sail with their kids or younger people, where the adults can afford to buy the boat, and bring on the younger kids to either drive or crew, for the adults, and keep them going that way. Because it's hard for, college age kids to afford boats, really.
Is the Melges 15 sort of close to a 420? Are they similar in process?
In terms of
Just
the sailing,
kind of the way they sail, the same size, kind of close, the same. I don't know.
it's similar in size. It's a more stable boat. I would say it's kind of similar upwind. It's probably more comfortable for bigger people. I think the cockpit in the 15's more comfortable for bigger people. Downwind, the 15 is quite a bit faster with the asymmetrical spinnaker and the shape of the hull. The boat planes pretty early downwind, so it gets up and goes, and it's really fun downwind, but still has a nice feel and groove upwind as well. So
What's
it's
the cost?
different. It's a more modern hull shape than the 420.
What's the cost of that boat?
12.9, I guess, is where we're at now with sales. So
That's good price.
yeah,
Just
that's a great
420s.
price for what you get.
Used 420s are $2,500 more than that. That's
Yeah, I don't know what a 420 price out at right now, but yeah, the 15 I think is a really good value with a asymmetrical kite.
Yeah.
And how strong the boat is and how it appeals to such a broad base of people.
Yeah.
Where adults are sailing the boat, and you don't see adults sailing 420s.
Yeah. What was the last couple questions? And this kind of goes back to what's the most fun about sailing with your son? And of the three Melges, who's the best sailor?
I would say my son is definitely the best sailor. At a young age, he's already way more successful than either Buddy or I have been. He's won, I guess, 3 inland East Scout champs and a couple of nationals and, blue chips and stuff like that. So he's well on his way and loves sailing and, loves the sport. And I started crewing for him when he was 10, I guess, on a Melges 17, which is a super high performance boat. And that's the funnest sailing that I've done, is crewing for my kids, my daughter as well, on the Melges 17 and the E-Scout, and whatever we can get our hands on, the Melges 24. And they love sailing, and they just love to do it.
Yeah.
It's cool to watch them progress and to see them get good and really enjoy it, like we all have.
Listen, I've really appreciated this time we've spent. It's been really fun talking to somebody who understands the sport. And one thing I mentioned to your son is you can tell he's from the Midwest because he's very humble about what he does. He did point out to me, I asked him what was important to him sort of in the back of his head, and he said that beating Grandpa's records was really kind of important. And I asked him if he told Grandpa, and he said absolutely. And he said Grandpa was very happy with that. So
yeah, well, it's good to have goals, right?
Right. No, it's been fun having the conversation, and I wish you the best of luck, and can't tell you how much I've appreciated the time, and best of luck to your daughter in her ski racing this year. Hopefully she'll defend her GS title there in Wisconsin.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that.
I want to thank Harry Melges III for spending some time with us talking about his company, sailing, the future of what the sport is going to be, and a variety of other topics, including a little bit about family. They're certainly one of America's premier sailing families, and we wish them the best of luck. So for next time, it's Greg Norman. I'm your host of Inside Great Lakes Sailing. We'll see you soon.